Okay. So good evening, everyone. Nice to see everyone here, particularly impressive in during week of Slichus. So we were looking at the reasons. The Tosfos, really, all the Rishonim discuss the parameters of the machlokes about Tiltul min HaTzad, and Tosfos comes up with the Chiddush that's based upon a Shiur in the Sugyas, that the debate of in our Gemara of Tiltul min HaTzad, Shmei Tiltul or Lo Shmei Tiltul, in which the stom of the Gemara, the sort of anonymous confusing voice of the Gemara, seems to imply that Tiltul min HaTzad, Shmei Tiltul, and is Asa, is talking about a case when Tiltul min HaTzad is being done l'tzorach davar ha'asur, where your intention is to do it in order to move the forbidden thing. However, if your intention is to do Tiltul min HaTzad in order to move something mutter, like pull a vegetable out of the ground, and you have no intention to move, you have no interest in moving the Muktza, just the earth will be shaken off in the process, that's Tiltul min HaTzad, where everyone would agree it is mutter. So Halacha l'maisa, according to Tosfos, the maskana is that Tiltul min HaTzad is also when you're doing it to move Muktza, for the sake of Muktza, but mutter when you're not doing it for the sake of Muktza. That's the Tosfos. We last year discussed reasons for this chiluk. Why does it make a difference whether you're doing it for the tzorech of davar mutter, tzorech of davar asa? When you move Muktza directly, there is no such chiluk. If you take Muktza and you move it, that's asa whether you're doing it for the sake of the Muktza item or for the sake of something that's mutter. There's no such chiluk. So why is there a difference in a scenario when you're doing Tiltul min HaTzad? So the most shmak svara, the most pleasurable and nice svara that we could give is a lomdus, a svara, as I mentioned, that when the point of Muktza is engagement with a Muktza item. When you directly engage with it, when you take something in your hand, that's engagement no matter what. But when you engage with something indirectly, there it depends. If your intention is to move the Muktza item for the sake of the Muktza item, that's an engagement with the Muktza item. If your intention is only for the sake of davar mutter, and the Muktza item incidentally gets moved, then that's non-engagement with a Muktza item. I want to stress that these are svaros and Muktza. This isn't analogous to svaros and melachos of grama and davar she'eino miskavin and the like. They're not. I mean, there's overlaps in these svaros. It's a Muktza svara that the issa of Muktza is engagement with this item, this object. Tiltul is engagement. If I directly am metal to something, that's engagement irrespective of my intention. I'm directly engaging with it, directly being metal to it. If I'm doing Tiltul min HaTzad via something else, then it's only an engagement, enough of an engagement when I'm doing it for the sake of the Muktza, not when I'm doing it for something else. This is a nice and good svara. It's a very, very glut and straight svara. It's advanced by a senior posek in the last century, by the Chazon Ish. It's an important svara to hear, and it makes a lot of sense. However, as I began demonstrating last time, it's not the view of those Rishonim that explicitly discuss the topic. So not all the Rishonim define their logic. Tosfos doesn't explain his reasoning. He just says it as a chiluk, right? He just says, it's done for the sake of the mutter item, it's mutter, and if it's done for the sake of the Muktza item, it's also. Doesn't give us the lomdus, the svara behind it. But a couple of the Rishonim do, and these Rishonim don't say the svara. And basically, we saw the Ritva, who seems to say that the svara is one of an allowance. Really, Tiltul min HaTzad is a weaker form of Tiltul, and it's a weaker form of Issa, and therefore they're lenient in a case where it's needed for the sake of Shabbos or the like. I do remember the last year, and forgive me if we looked at these Rishonim inside, or I just quoted them. Just go to them. So let's just, for the sake of thoroughness, have a quick look inside. The Ritva says as follows. The Ritva, by the way, says this in several occasions. I just printed this here. The third, this is source 8 on page 3. The third paragraph in the Ritva, he brings basically a summary of the contradictions between the sugyas as per Tosfos, and he says, we can answer this. The lo domi, they're not comparable. Here in our sugya, we're talking about Tiltul min HaTzad done for the prohibited item. Gegon mace. In that case, Tiltul min HaTzad shmei Tiltul asa. All the other cases, dominum ba'alma, that in other sugyas we talk about, have a tzorech of mutter. or the Shabbos. Therefore, they allowed in it Tiltul min HaTzad. So the Ritva very clearly, he says the Svara, it's not the pshat that it's not called Tiltul in the case where you're moving it with the Dava Asa. Pshat is it is Tiltul, but Hitziru bo l'tzorech Dava Muktza, Hitziru bo l'tzorech Shabbos, and so carries on the language of the Ritva. So I think that's very clear. The Ritva isn't saying an omdus that if it's done for the sake of the Muktza item, you're not engaging. It's not called Tiltul, lo Shmei Tiltul in that case. He says, yeah, it is Shmei Tiltul, as per the punchline in our Gemara. Tiltul min HaTzad Shmei Tiltul. Just the Tiru, it's an allowance that's made because of Tzorech Shabbos, Tzorech Dava Muktza. So that's the Ritva. I also printed in source 9 the Ozura. As I mentioned, the Ozura is much harder safe to find one's way around. It's not written in the order of the Gemara, it's written as a halachic work. But either way, I saw the Ozura reference and looked it up. And the Ozura says that the problem is the other way around. Really, Tiltul min HaTzad should be allowed. But if you're doing it for Tzorech Muktza, we're worried that you'll end up moving the Muktza directly, and therefore they didn't allow Tiltul min HaTzad when you're doing it for Tzorech Muktza. Let's just read this inside in Ozura again on page 3, source 9. V'hayte boskinon hilchos karav betiltul min HaTzad shmei Tiltul. Hainu dafka b'meis or kiyetzavei. Since you need the Muktza item, the Tzorech Dava HaMataltel, since you need the item that you're moving, or b'kavana matal today, and you're moving it with intention, the ikatil tulala isadava, and your main also. Tiltul, your main intention, your main movement is for the sake of the also thing, the thing which is also Tiltul. So for Rav and Hachmi, therefore Rav held to be Machmi, Tilm also the Tiltul also the Gamri b'yadayim, lest you come to move the Muktza with your hands, literally with your hands, and therefore it's also. So he says sort of 3 times, since you need the Muktza item, and you're doing it with Kavana, and your Ikka Tiltul is for that, therefore Rav held that you need to that there's a takana, a gezerah that you might come to move the item itself. So these are the 3 stories that we find in the Rishonim. Now, there perhaps is room to speculate on nafkaminas between these three cases, and one example of this is in a case where you are moving Muktza with intention to move the Muktza, but your ultimate purpose is for a heta item, for a heta need. And this is the Shulchan Aruch that I printed in source 3. So Shulchan Aruch in Simon Shin Yud Aleph, and the Shulchan Aruch says that if you want to move a mace, l'tzorech mokum ha-mace, or so you want the place where the mace is, or there's an object you want to get access to. Now, a mace is a high level of Muktza. It's called Muktza machmas gufay, meaning it's fundamentally Muktza, and you're not allowed to move such Muktza l'tzorech mokum because you need to get to its place. However, the Shulchan Aruch says that if you do Tiltul min HaTzad, that's allowed. Why is it allowed if you do Tiltul min HaTzad? Because this is called L'tzorech Dava HaMuta, because you want to get access to the object underneath it, or you want to use the place where the mace is found. Are you with me in this? Tosa says that Tiltul min HaTzad, when I want to move the Muktza item, is Osa. Tiltul min HaTzad, when I want to get to the Mutter item, and the Mutter item just to move incidentally, is Mutter. The Shulchan Aruch says that if you are moving the Mutter item with intent to move the Mutter item, and you directly want to move the Mutter item, but your purpose in so doing is for the sake of Heta, because you want Makomo, you want its place. The Magen Avraham, by the way, talks about other scenarios where, for example, you want to move the mace because you want to allow Kohanim to have access, or whatever it may be. Then this is called Tiltul min HaTzad in a mutter manner, and therefore you're allowed to do it because it's a Tiltul min HaTzad to Tzorech Dava HaMuta. Now, if we think about this, what logic would allow you to move an object, to move the Muktza itself, the mace itself, for the sake of Makomo? If we say the Svara, what we call now the Svara, the Chazon Ish, if we say the Svara that my action doesn't relate to the Muktza item. So tell me, Rabbi Zobin, that makes sense in a case where you're pulling a vegetable and dust and earth or rubble shake off the vegetable. So argues the Chazon Ish that I'm not engaging directly with the Muktza because I'm doing Tiltul and HaTzad, and the Muktza just incidentally is falling off. In this case over here, where I'm doing Tiltul and HaTzad in order to move the mace, it's true that I'm doing it for the purpose of Heta because I want the place where the mace is, but I'm directly trying to move the mace with Tiltul and HaTzad. Would the Svara of the Chazon Ish make sense? I don't think so, because I'm trying to move the mace. If the Svara is like we saw from the Rishonim, sorry? Don't make the comparison though. Don't not a good comparison. It's not a good comparison. Mitzvah Bavariya is the world of not a good comparison. Different concept of what's more important, doing a mitzvah, doing an avera, the purpose which will supersede. There's a logic over here. Again, what's the svara of Tiltul and HaTzad being allowed if you're doing it for the sake of Dov HaMutar? So Chazon Ish or sake of Dov Asas. Chazon Ish says if I'm moving the bed to move the mace, it's true I'm indirectly handling the mace, but I'm trying to move the mace. That's engagement with the mace. That's also. If I'm moving the parsnip, the turnip, and incidentally the earth moves, I'm not directly moving the earth physically. I'm not moving the earth in terms of my intentionality in the action. I'm not engaging with earth. That's not called tiltul. In this case here, where I'm trying to move the mace, roll the mace along because I want the space where the mace is, or I want the mace out of the way because of kayanim. Am I in this logic? Am I directly engaging with the mace? Absolutely. My reason for doing it is because I want something mutter. I want the place. But what I'm doing is engaging with the mace. Finish doesn't make sense over here. Whereas if the svara is, let's say, like the Ritva, that I'm doing it because I have a need, it's an allowance that was made in Hilchos Muktza, indirect movements is allowed because there's a heta purpose, that's my intentionality, then I understand I have a heta purpose, that's my intention, because I want the place where the mace is. So if the logic is like the Ritva, that it's Tiltul and HaTzad is a type of Tiltul, but I'm moving it because of intentionality, of purpose, and they allowed me to do so if there's a Dov HaMutar to let me do that, then the Svara of Tiltul and HaTzad, then the Svara, the application of Shulchan Aruch makes sense. So I think the Shulchan Aruch is a raya, not like the logic of this beautiful Svara. I think it's a lovely Svara, and not directly engaging with it. But you see in the Shulchan Aruch that's not correct. Yeah. Right.
In the scenario you just said, are you moving the body normally, or are you doing something else?
So no, so the Shulchan Aruch says, this is Shulchan Aruch in source 3. Shulchan Aruch, let's read the Shulchan Aruch together. Shulchan Aruch, source 3 on page 2. Shini Yud Aleph Sif Hey. Im tzorich l'makom hameis, if you need the space of the mace, or an item on which the mace is placed, a mutzah item which the place is made. Mutzah the Tiltul and HaTzad, then you're allowed to do Tiltul and HaTzad. For example, that you roll it from bed to bed. Why? Since it's the Tzorich Dov HaMutar. So the Shulchan Aruch is applying Tosfos' logic that you can do Tiltul and HaTzad, the Tzorich Dov HaMutar, to this case over here. But this is a radical extension of Tosfos' logic. I'm intending to move the Muktza. I'm doing an action in order to move the Muktza. But my purpose in so doing is for a mutter need because I want the space. And that's allowed. Now I ask you, if the logic of allowing Tiltul and HaTzad for the sake of something mutter is that for the sake of mutter needs or Shabbos needs, they allowed me to do Tiltul and HaTzad, then the Shulchan Aruch makes perfect sense. If the logic of the allowance of Tiltul and HaTzad is because I'm not trying to move the Muktza item, I'm trying to move the heter item, in this case I am trying to move the Muktza item, I'm trying to move the mace, and therefore the logic of the Shulchan Aruch makes no sense at all. Am I carrying anyone with me? Is this? Yeah, Jeffrey, is this okay?
I'm not quite following why this isn't exactly the same case as trying to move something for the harmless.
Because my direct action that I'm doing is intended, targeted action to move a mace. There's a purpose in what I'm doing, but my action is an action with intent to move a mace, albeit indirectly. With the parsnip, my intention is to move the parsnip. It happens to be that Muktza gets moved. So the logic of the story is, physically I'm not engaging directly with it. Psychologically, I'm not engaging with it. I've no intention to move the the earth. It's a side effect of what I'm doing. That's not called engagement with the earth. But here it's not a side effect of action. My action is a targeted action to move the mace.
You're not directly, that's the whole point of downgrading it to something like that.
Tiltul HaTzad means I'm not physically directly moving it. Tosfos is mechadish that nonetheless, or the Gemara really says that's not by itself, that's not enough of the svara. Says Tosfos, that's when I'm planning to move the Muktza. But when I'm doing it to move the heter, not. Now over here, I am doing it to move the Muktza. The reason I want to move the Muktza is because of a legitimate Shabbos goal, to have space use. So if the logic is that space use justifies moving Muktza, this justifies indirect movement of Muktza because it's for a legitimate reason, then it makes sense, the Shulchan Aruch. If the logic here is because I'm not directly engaging with the mace, I am here, I'm trying to move the mace.
Is the distinction that in the case of the radish, you've got two things. You've got the object, which is mutter, and you've got the kavanah. But in the case of the mace, all you've got is the kavanah.
In the case,
because you're moving something which is not.
You can put it like that. In the case of the mace, I'm directly intending to move the mace. Yeah.
The only thing which allows it is the kavanah.
That my ultimate purpose is a tzorech mutter, and therefore we can say the sorrow. Therefore, for the sake of mutter needs, I'm now to it. Yeah.
It's not. You need both.
In the case of Sunan, you have both. Yeah.
You need both. You need the object itself and the kavanah.
Correct. Yes. So that's the distinction between the two. And what's the relevant pertinent halachic feature? Well, it depends on what logic you understand. If your logic is the Chazon Ish, then we look at what am I intending to move? What's my target? Yeah, correct. Yeah, that's right. That is correct. Yeah.
So I understand it more on the context of the determining having access, but with the Sorech Makoma, wasn't that a general factor that could be used elsewhere?
No, but Sorech Makoma is a heter with lower forms of Muktza, like Klisha, melachot, Issa, and things like that. With a mace, it's not a heter. Mace is we've never really discussed yet different degrees of Muktza. But the Sorech Makoma heter over here is not a classic Sorech Makoma. It's a heter because I'm doing it for the tzorech of something that's mutter. Correct. That's right. Yeah.
So sorry, does the Shulchan Aruch say anything about the ma'ot shel gabe hakar? Because would that not be similar to this, where you're indirectly doing it, and at least I haven't seen the Shulchan Aruch comment on this, but when Tosfot brings it, he says that's a mutter case, but that sounds a bit like the case here with the mate.
Tosfos there says it's a mutter case because my intention is to get the cushion, not to get the money, and the money just falls off.
Right. So is that not like so again trying to line that up with the Chazon Ish, you would have this.
The Chazon Ish would say that the money falls off incidentally, and my intention is just to get hold of the pillow.
Right. But so is it not similar with the mates? My intention is just to get hold of the space. Yes, I am moving the mate, but I'm kind of.
This is what Jeffrey was arguing a few minutes ago. Also, you're both telling me I'm wrong in what I'm saying.
Maybe there's a distinction between space and if there's something under the bed that you want. I don't know there's another object.
Perhaps this would only be true. This logic would only be true if you have the mate, let's say, on a bed. So you're moving the bed to get on the bed. If you've got the mate there, you want the space underneath the bed.
That was my distinction. That in the case of let's say the pillow with the money on it, or the vegetable with the dust with the earth on it, I'm moving a mutter item for the sake of that mutter item, and just incidentally, the muktzah item moves. So there you can argue I'm not in any way engaging with the muktzah item. Over here, it's true I'm moving a mitter, which is a mutter item, but I'm moving that mitter in order to move the mace. Why do I want to move the mace? Because I want the space. But what I'm doing is a targeted action of moving mason. Whereas with the pillowcase, I'm doing a targeted action of moving pillows. Money happens to incidentally be dragged along. I'm doing a targeted action of getting vegetables. Earth happens to get moved along. Here, I'm doing a targeted action on moving a mace. If I wanted the bed, then achlami. If I want the bed and the mace just rolls off, that's like the pillow with the money on top. That would be tzorech davar mutar, absolutely. That would be a non-controversial thing. Okay, I give that svara over to you, gentlemen, and Josh and Jeffrey, you'll ponder this over Rosh Hashanah, and I'll tell you later, maybe a few after I finish the share at 10 o'clock. If anyone's interested in hearing Litvish stories, I'll tell a couple of stories about discussions about to what degree one's meant to be thinking and learning over Rosh Hashanah, or whether you're meant to be focused on your davening. Different perspectives in different parts of Klal Yisrael around these matters. But either way, if for some reason or other Rosh Hashanah you need a little break, we can ponder over this far. I think this chiluk I'm saying is good, despite Josh and Jeffrey's objections, but that's reflecting it. Okay. I'll just use the few minutes remaining, maybe just to talk about some other nafkaminas in these svaras, and then we'll to the degree we're able to sort of finish this topic of Tiltul and HaTzad, the tzorech davar mutar. Am I giving another share before? What's the program? Just how many shiurim do we have left? I say it's made sure we've got one. Okay, that's quite a while off, so we'll see what we do then. Okay, well, I'll try and just finish off if I can. Just a couple of other halachas around this. There's a fascinating discussion in the poskim about Tiltul min HaTzad of a ner, where I'm doing it for the sake of the light. Very, very interesting discussion also. So I have a candle, which is Muktza, and I don't move the candle directly, I move a plate on which the candle is sitting. So a flame is Muktza. I move the flame indirectly by moving something else and thus moving the flame. So it's Tiltul min HaTzad. And my intention is that I want the light to beam out somewhere else. So why by the way is a flame of Muktza? No one exactly knows, but the presumption is either way, shall have a flame in and of in itself as Muktza. It's not considered a keli, and therefore it's considered machmaskufa, a very serious form of Muktza. Now, if I'm doing Tiltul min HaTzad to move the lamp, to protect the lamp from being destroyed, that would be called Tiltul min HaTzad with tzorech davar asa, and that would be asa. If I'm doing Tiltul min HaTzad in order to get the light elsewhere, there are poskim who hold that that's allowed because light is a mutter need. You're allowed to have lighting up rooms on Shabbos. So I find this again absolutely fascinating, because if the logic of the het of Tiltul min HaTzad is an allowance that for legitimate Shabbos needs I can move Muktza Tiltul min HaTzad, then that makes a lot of sense. It is a legitimate Shabbos need to light up a room. There's no issa with lighting up rooms, and therefore I can do Tiltul min HaTzad to ensure that the light of the lantern shines in the room where I want it. However, if the basis of the allowance to move it is because I'm not directly engaging with Muktza, again, I find this svara very hard. I don't know if Josh and Jeffrey will agree with me in this case either. I find this svara very hard. I directly want to move the lamp in order that the lamp should shine elsewhere. Can we really argue that that's a non-engagement with the Muktza item? I don't think so. I want the lamp and the flame to go elsewhere in order to shine elsewhere. So again, just to summarize, a very simple halacha. A lamp and a lantern is Muktza. Very serious form of Muktza. If I want to do Tiltul min HaTzad to save the lantern from damage, also that's Tiltul min HaTzad, tzorech davar asa. We have a Tosfos, that's also. We have a Shulchan Aruch, a Gemara, that's also. Tiltul min HaTzad shmei Tiltul. However, if I want to do it in order to get the light to shine elsewhere, there are poskim who say it's mutter. Why? Because the light use on Shabbos is a legitimate Shabbos activity. Again, this only seems to make sense if the basis of allowance of Tiltul min HaTzad is that the needs of Shabbos, so Heta needs, push aside the issa of Tiltul min HaTzad, then I get that svara. However, if the basis of the heter is because it's not it's an incidental engagement, I'm not directly engaging the mutter, for crying out loud, of course I'm directly engaging the Muktza over here. I'm moving the lantern indirectly, physically, Tiltul min HaTzad, but in order to move the lantern. So again, I don't think this svara would make sense. Yeah. So that's what I'm calling. I'm calling the lantern Muktza, but the lantern is sitting on a tray or whatever in a manner in which it won't be Muktza. Yeah. So if I'm moving the tray, where in a case where it's not bosses, so if I'm moving the tray in order to protect the lantern, Tiltul min HaTzad, asa. If I'm moving the tray in order to to get the light also. Whatever reason the tray's not a bosses, there's something else sitting on the tray, or I accidentally left the lantern there. I didn't want to make it bosses. We said whenever you want to move something, you always need to ask yourself two questions: is it bosses, and is it tiltul and HaTzad? So it's a case where it's not bosses. I'm not worried about bosses in the same way as the cushion isn't a bosses for the coins and all these other cases, right? So in the same way as the bed's not a bosses for the mace, it's not a bosses because it was accidentally left there, or the other more important things on it. But now I want to move it for the sake of the lantern. The poskim who allow it argue, I'm moving it for mutter needs, for light. And that's equivalent to davar nital. I mean, there is no light, there's no object that I'm moving. It's called a tzorech for mutter. Now that only makes sense if we say, if the logic is that a need of Shabbos is enough to push away tiltul. But if we're saying because my action isn't linking to the Muktza item, of course the action is I'm trying to move the lamp. I'm trying to move the lantern. Why do I want to move the lantern? Because I want the light elsewhere. But my action is that of trying to get the lantern from this location to that location. So why should that be mutter? Whereas if the logic is like the Ritva, that we push aside it's a tiltul HaTzad when there's a mutter need, then that would make sense. Paul's also not happy with me this time.
No, I was trying.
Now we have
Conceptualize the flame as a davar nital.
no, the flame is not davar nital. The flame is also Muktza.
So
flame is
it's
Muktza.
the light.
It's the light, yes. The light is, you're moving it for the sake of the light. Yeah. So there's no light, there's no object. I'm not talking science here, I'm saying there's no object, there's no entity, there's a need, a use, a utility that you get called light. So so I'm moving a lantern for a legitimate utility purpose to get light. For mutter needs, I want to light up my room. But I'm directly trying to move the lantern, through tiltul HaTzad. But tiltul HaTzad alone is not a heter, because tiltul HaTzad shemei het tiltul. It's only a heter if it's done tzorech davar mutter. And yet there are places who say that getting the light is called tzorech davar mutter. True, but not a step far enough, because the Gemara paskins tiltul HaTzad shemei tiltul. Tosfos asks the Shiur, and Tosfos says depends what your purpose of doing tiltul HaTzad is. But in and of itself, tiltul HaTzad is not enough of a heter. When famously, I probably speak up, but we run out of time, but we'll do it the Sunday that we'll finish this off. Shabbos, we'll look at the classic sort of bosses shilas. But Shabbos, when I move a tray which has candlesticks sitting on it, so I resolve the bosses issue by putting something else down. How do I resolve the tiltul HaTzad issue? The answer is because I need it in a Masechet Shabbat. That is the Shulchan Aruch. Sifei that we just learned is the Shulchan Aruch, that this is called tiltul HaTzad because I want my table, the space of my table for my Shabbos lunch, whatever it is. So the basis of that is that's called tiltul HaTzad. Just for those who have some time over the next few days, there is a Rif who deals with the same contradictions as Tosfos does between Sukkos, that's source 4, and there's a run which we looked at briefly in the last year, and a Rashba who try and work out what the Rif means, and basically the Rashba argues that the Rif again means the same svara as the Ritva, that the Issa Tiltul HaTzad is pushed aside for the needs of Shabbos. It's not shut that the heter tiltul HaTzad is this. My nice lomdus is not considered engaging with the Muktza as geschmack and as tasty and as beautiful as that svara is. Yet another Rishon doesn't hold of it. The Rashba argues that the Rif means again the same svara, just of pushing aside the Issa Tiltul HaTzad when there's a significant need. So just to summarize, I think we've seen from the poskim, and next year we'll have a brief look, if you have a chance, a brief look at the Rif and how the Rashba interprets the Rif. That and the Rishonim that we saw, none of them go with this far as beautiful as it is. That if I'm indirectly engaging tiltul HaTzad and I'm not directly trying to move the Muktza, it's just incidental. It's not called an engagement in Muktza. They all consider it, and very counter to your intuition, they all call tiltul HaTzad is an engagement. But since it's a weaker engagement, therefore gets pushed aside, which is really the words of the Gemara. Tiltul HaTzad, shmei tiltul. Those words have to ring in our ears. Don't get all conceptual. Don't tell me there's lomdas that tiltul HaTzad is not a direct enough engagement. No, we paskin tiltul HaTzad shmei tiltul. It is an engagement with the object. However, since it's a bit more lenient, less direct, they created allowances in certain cases. That's how the Rishonim tell us to learn the Gemara. Okay, so we'll stop here in terms of the Shiur. Anyone that wants to stay behind for some storytelling, you're welcome to do so. But I'm conscious it's Slichas week, and yeah.
Hi, Rabbi Zobin. If you're going to do some